Over the past few weeks, I've been building this bridge section completely from scratch. Styrene scratch building, 3D printed elements, foam carving, and ground cover are all here. I've spent well over 100 hours on this project, and it's not even close to being completed. But before I can do that, I need your help. If you haven't figured it out already, this is going to be a diorama for my M1A1 Abrams build. By the end of the video, you may have already spotted the problem. I'll pitch you my solutions then. I designed these bridge beams in Tinkercad. I could have scratch built them out of styrene, but I needed multiple sets. I was also able to manipulate the design, so when it came in contact with the edge of the diorama, I could make a cut. This would avoid having to cut cured resin with a razor saw, which creates a lot of dust, and that's not fun for anyone. I also had the opportunity to design them so they would easily interlock. This way, they go together just like a Lego set. Easy. I decided to add these bearings, which come in contact with the bridge and the piers it sits on. That way, when things expand and contract in the real world, the bridge doesn't crack. It doesn't really help here, but it really does a lot to create that real look that I'm going for. I glue everything together with CA glue, and I use activator, so the process goes a little quicker. I think it's always important to lay out a diorama before you really start building up the groundwork. If you're a fan of leaf rubbing, then this next tip is definitely for you. I use this to create a template for the foam that is eventually going to turn into the pier. After I traced it out on the foam base using a crayon, it was much easier to transfer that exact image onto the paper template. I created multiple templates for multiple size of the pier. I just use the glue gun for most of my foam work. I know it sets pretty quickly, but if you're precise, it's okay. I wanted to add some details here to give the bridge beams a little bit more character. Those blocks were just made from styrene, and I attached the bearings to that. Now it's time to start the road work for the bridge. A lot of the reference photos I saw showed a sidewalk or walking area on at least one side of the bridge. So I carved it out like I saw and tried to create varying different textures as if it were a concrete structure. What's fun about foam is that you can distress it. We're going to end up covering most of this surface, but in the testing I did, it worked better to create cracks before I covered it. So that's what I did. I went through and along all the edges and along the center line, I just cracked the surface just like you would on any regular asphalt street. It was fun. And I know what you're thinking. I may have gone a little overboard with all the cracks. But a tank's going to cover most of it. I know a lot of concrete bridges don't have asphalt on them and therefore wouldn't create so many cracks, but a large flat surface just kind of looked boring to me. So we went ahead and covered it with asphalt paint. I never used this product before. I'm happy with the end result, But to achieve it, you really have to soak the area once you've kind of brushed it out. It is water-based, so my process was kind of brush it out and then put water on it and then let it dry. And that seemed to work pretty good. In a normal situation, I probably would have used like a urethane glue for this section, but for time, I had to use the glue gun. So it wasn't as precise as I'd like it to be. Here I'm just using some smooth foam to make the finish on the concrete pillars look more realistic. And then it's on to making some guardrails. This again is in Tinkercad, and if you've never had the chance to use this program, I would absolutely recommend trying it out. It is free, and even if you don't have a 3D printer, it's just a great way to visualize what you're working on. So if you're scratch building something, it just has basic shapes, and with a little bit of practice, I think you'd be surprised all the things you can do. These were kind of modeled after a Meng kit I have, and I just needed more sections, and so I printed them out, and I think they work great. One thing about 3D prints is that the cured resin is pretty brittle. You can get other resins, but for the most part, they're pretty easy to break if dropped or mishandled. So just be careful when you're using some delicate things. And that's mostly the reason why for these light poles, I decided to scratch build the poles out of styrene. And again, here we're making a railing. This railing is going to go on the edge of the bridge where the pedestrians would be walking so that no one falls off the bridge. And this is the start of my problems. When I originally designed this diorama, I had this being the back of the diorama. But before I would realize that, I had to cover the rest of the bridge in more details. Here I'm just making what I think is a drainage pipe. I'm going to go with it's a drainage pipe that would collect some rainwater and dump it into the river below. I saw it on some reference photos, and I thought it was another cool element to add. Then it was a matter of building up the groundwork. Again, this would have been the time to realize which way we were going to view the diorama. We had to put the end cap on the guardrail and then continue the asphalt off the end of the bridge. And I made these sections deliberately able to come apart because I want to be able to paint the bridge and the underside of it without having the roadway glued to the model. So any areas where it doesn't blend very well will be fixed, but first I want to make sure everything's painted, which we will get to. Here is just our mix of some water, celluclay, and paint. And then I dumped various grit from the backyard, sand, and some ballast all over everything to give it more texture. That's eventually going to be water. So I want to make sure it was clear. And then lock it in with some isopropyl alcohol and glue. The celluclay takes quite a while to dry, so I wanted to remove as much moisture as possible before I let it sit to dry. This was another good reason to keep the roadway and the base separate, because as you can see, it barely fits in the spray booth. I was really excited to get some color on this piece, really start to see it come alive. As far as I got this week was just base coating. I really want to go through and pick out all the details and individually paint each one of these sections. Maybe a whole video devoted to each one. How to paint concrete, how to paint groundwork, how to paint aluminum guardrails and light poles, a rusty bridge, water. I feel like there's a lot we can really show with this, but for this week, I really wanted to be able to visualize and to show you kind of what my plan was. I think with this model, I'm going to stay away from the resin pour. I don't know if my blood pressure can take it, and I know not everyone is up for that challenge or maybe has the means to buy all that resin, so I think we're going to try maybe some different techniques to see if we can make realistic water. And I did the same thing for the roadway and the railing, guardrail. Just blocking everything out, getting it ready for a deeper dive in a coming video. This color scheme I found on the curb is pretty typical for countries in the Middle East, maybe even other countries, not so typical in the United States where I reside. But I thought this looked really cool, and it really helps make the roadway pop. I did a little pre-shading with the dust. I know I was getting a little ahead of myself, but I wanted to cover up some of the yellow that spilled out onto the roadway. So now that we have everything assembled, this is where I need your help. It's this railing. I don't know if it's too much of an obstruction. When you add the tank, it creates a visual plane that runs right across the body of the Abrams. And I just don't know if that works. I have some ideas, but I'd really like to hear what you guys think in the comments. And this is why I stopped here. There's plenty of time to change the look of this diorama. Do we have to create something that destroys that fence, or do we leave it the way it is? Tell me what you want to see, and I'll do it. Unless you're watching this video a year from now. Then just watch the next video. Till then, see ya.